Cinebois to Cinnamon, episode 84.
84?
84. Finally, Ben, we're here.
Oh my God, only 84 episodes to talk about Mr. Danny Boyle. I'm still in the back of my mind, like, I must ask Danny for a Sunshine episode one day. Still haven't plucked up the courage to do it. But here we are, talking about...
No.
Next week.
Yeah, look at it just cuts. And it just, you go, next week, Sunshine.
Yeah. I've clearly been crying.
Yeah, it's a bit awkward.
No, we're going to talk about 28 Days Later in the franchise, the film I hold dear, and a film I am a fan of to an extent where I think my opinion is skewed quite heavily in its favour, and I find it quite tough to listen to criticism about it. I'm one of those, sort of like Star Wars fans, but the reverse.
But less lame.
Yeah, less just like, not my Star Wars, just like I cherish it.
Yeah. But did you think, I mean, because I know you said this a few times on the build-up to 28 Years, which of course the film we'll be discussing after our exhaustive deep dive of the franchise, a little bit of chat about Danny Boyle, and we dabbled a little bit with zombie movies, although we've kind of already done that a little bit, but why not?
We haven't filmed it though.
No, exactly, yeah. Do you think that, or did you feel the pressure of that kind of expectation to like it as we were sitting down in the cinema? Yeah,
a great deal. Yeah, I was really worried it was going to be shit, to the extent where I
was worried for you.
Yeah,
because I really like the films, and I like Danny Boyle, but my like for him doesn't hold a candle to yours.
No.
So I was worried for you.
Yeah, I was so. I mean, I was elated because at the time I had like 95% on Rotten Tomatoes. So I was like, okay, critically, it's
holding well.
Good.
Yeah.
So I had that, but I did also. I'm kind of aware of his track record being not perfect,
patchy.
In the eyes of the audience, and and he can take some bold risks. So I was scared, yes, and that paranoia etched itself into a couple of dreams that I had as well. But we'll talk about actual 28 Years Later in a little bit. But just know that going in that I am not as impartial as I usually am. But I think it's important to defend things that you're in love with.
Yeah, for sure. And I think as long as you're upfront and sort of transparent about your kind of love for something, I don't see it as a problem.
No. Good, because it's going to be... I'm going to gush.
I'm going to criticise and then Ben's going to get angry and start sort of threats.
No, I'm curious to hear your take on it, a more sort of level-headed take on both the franchise and the film. I didn't think it was perfect either, actually, and I'm kind of coming to terms with that. But yeah, looking forward to it.
Yeah,
cool.
Shall we?
I think we should. Yeah.
Questing the cinematic void.
Okay, then. So, Danny Boyle, where did it start, Ben?
It's a good question. I was trying to think of this. I can't exactly remember why I had an inclination more towards his films than others. I think it probably was... Do you remember when Millions came out? 2004. So a friend of mine, Arlo, went to see that with his family and said it was great. And I sort of bought the DVD, and it said, like, I think actually it wasn't a very well designed DVD. It just said in kind of italics, like, a Danny Boyle film. And I was like, who's this?
Right.
Looked into it. I was like, I've heard of Trainspotting. That was him. Like, I'd not seen it at that point because I was 10. But so I started watching his other stuff. I think I watched 28 Days Later first. I got my hands on like a really rubbish Fox DVD copy of it.
Yeah.
Then Trainspotting. Actually, no. I think I'd seen The Beach, but I didn't know it was him as well. And
right,
I was familiar with The Beach. I think my parents, when they were younger, travelled around a lot. Like, I was born in Hong Kong, so they were part of that generation of people when The Beach came out. Keen backpackers, right? And it was a huge hit amongst backpackers, the book. And then so I think I kind of had a relationship with the film already. And I just started watching his stuff, and I was like, this is great. This is really, like, the energy in it is just so unique. And like it was the first time I remember having like a visceral reaction to a film was one of his. I think probably 28 Days Later. With the zombies sprinting up the tower block. I was like, oh, this is good.
Yeah.
It was my. He quite often is my gateway into a lot of broader cultural stuff that otherwise I wouldn't have. Like Godspeed You Black Emperor, for example.
Oh God, yeah.
I sort of have a fascination with physics because of Sunshine, even though Sunshine isn't particularly scientifically accurate. Like it has its roots in that. Sunshine was my gateway to things like 2001 because it was inspired by 2001. Yeah. So it's funny. Like a lot of films I've watched have been as a result of being an inspiration for films directed by him. So that's where it started. That's the long answer. Patreons can get the short answer. It's probably quite dull.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. I think one thing that I sort of particularly attribute to him is that you're right in that he has this kind of very dynamic, kind of restless cinematic style.
Yeah.
But I think more broadly that applies to his kind of choices and the kind of films he makes. There's a restlessness in that. Like you can't really pin him down to a genre.
No,
because he can do those kind of like quite sweet, kind of like English films.
Millions,
Yesterday. But he can also do horror, of course. Sci-fi, and he could do like really sort of dirty, grubby sort of films about addiction and kind of
people
social
cutting their
decay
arms off and stuff.
So he does have this kind of ability to. I guess what I'm trying to say is there's transferability between genre. That so you're kind of watching his films and you all know that they are his films.
Yes.
You can tell. Despite the fact he takes on like a whole kind of wide sort of swath of sort of different cultures and subject matter and genre, of course, and everything that's tied to those. You still feel like you're watching a Danny Boyle film, and I think that's kind of one of the things I've always really admired about him. Even if I've not always admired every film he's made, I've kind of thought, well, it's weird that it still feels like one of his films.
Yes.
Even though like the film he did before was a sci-fi and now he's doing this. It's something I really admire about him. And it's funny because we talk about these kind of more kind of adaptable directors and we tend to frame that in the context of people like James Mangold, right? Who are kind of not like studio for hire directors, but a safe pair of hands with a certain budget.
Mark Forster,
like the kind of people that could try their hand at lots of different genres, but don't have a style that is as kind of adaptable and immediately apparent as Danny Boyle.
Definitely. Agreed. I think he has kind of got his own genre, and that consists of telling a story, not being afraid of voiceover, telling a story with the camera when appropriate, really using like dynamism and like weird frame rates
and music,
and there's like a rhythm to his films.
More very apparent rhythm.
Very obvious. I think it was him. I think he was actually quoting someone else, but he did say once that realism is easy to admire but difficult to love. And it kind of that has stuck with me as like I kind of see that in your films. Like you're not that concerned with telling a story with like just a scene two characters sat in a cafe.
No,
like you want the camera to tell the story just as much as you want the characters and the dialogue to tell the story, and the energy of the actors and the energy of the characters. Quite often your camera will match that. And like character development quite often is character development and plot beats are quite often interspersed with like a chase scene or just a running, just relentless.
It's an excuse
energy.
for that dynamism, isn't it?
Yeah. To for better or worse as well. Like sometimes it can be a bit much, I think. But when your film is about like rage, for example, and like the kind of when people snap, I suppose that's sort of the. Apart from Resident Evil, which is Alex Garland's inspiration for 28 Days Later, you have, I think Boyle was more keen to sort of tap into like weird like road rage incidents of just like very minor things making people snap and how that how to portray that on screen, and you do that with a moving, restless camera with high shutter and all that kind of thing. So yeah, his style is, yeah, like you say, very dynamic, very in your face, and even his worst work zips by as a result, I think. Like, and there's always something good to find in his lesser films. Like, there's a scene in A Life Less Ordinary, a karaoke scene, which is just amazing. And yeah, his use of music and stuff like that as well really chimes well with me, I think. I wasn't very well a couple of weeks ago. I had like some kind of stomach thing. I chucked on the beach and then put on 28 Days Later after that. I don't know why. So there's a bizarre kind of comfort with it that comes with that, I think. Just having a film zip by and having it told to you through rhythm, I think.
Yeah.
And I always admire him for that. Obviously, Trainspotting is kind of one of those films that refuses to go away in the minds of the people. And I know it's sort of attached to a generation a little bit. I think as time goes on, that film will become less relevant.
It already had that with the book, didn't it? I think.
Yeah.
And then obviously that kind of changed when they released the film adaptation.
Yes.
But broadly speaking, I mean, I think I'm right in saying this, maybe not, that the same people that had reverence for the book, kind of that kind of love kind of transformed to adopt the movie as well.
Yeah, that's true. The book, I think they started adapting the film before the book took off, actually. It didn't, but the film didn't make the book successful. It was by the time the film was released, it was already quite huge.
Yeah.
But they had like 250 copies, I think, when they started in 94, 95. So it was weird. Like, I think they kind of saw something in that before it was even successful. And then, but yeah, no, I think there's a generation that will forever adore Trainspotting, and then there's my generation, which is kind of the generation after that, or maybe a couple, who I see it as a kind of a brilliant film, like a work of art. It doesn't really speak to me, or it didn't speak to me as like because I wasn't really in my 20s when I saw it. I was a lot younger. So I was more curious about it, I think. I didn't really understand what heroin could ever do, and still don't, thankfully. But it was, yeah. That film is actually more kind of, the drug it's inspired by is more ecstasy than heroin, I think. And people sort of hear it being about a bunch of heroin addicts and assume it's going to be like a slow burn. It's not. It's hugely vibrant. And again, that goes back to what we were saying about his style, I think. And
Yeah.
sort of like relentless energy that is popular, but is something I admire deeply. So what about you? How did you get? What was your sort of introduction to him?
Again, like you, I don't really remember.
It's always been around, I swear.
Yeah, I think Trainspotting was the first film of his I ever saw.
Okay, yeah.
And I saw it when I was a teenager, probably couldn't have been much older than 17.
Yeah.
And this is when I lived in the north of England. And at that age, when you're a teenager, I think you're kind of like desperate to borrow from other cultures.
Yeah,
And I think like what this thing a lot of teenagers do is, I mean, I'm not saying this in a bad way, but I just think they kind of go out to find something new, but they typically go back.
Yeah, right.
And because obviously they're relying on the fact that a lot of their generation are only into things that are new, it almost has this kind of sheen of something otherworldly.
Yeah.
And obviously there's a lot of messages there, and I guess this, I think the kind of teenage approximation of some of the themes about addiction and everything are probably kind of like, probably kind of watered down to something kind of like, there's parallels between our lives and, the kind of iconography and the imagery that, of course, as you get older, you understand as an entirely different level. But as a teenager, you approach it from that point of view, I think. And that's, I'm kind of, this is a lot to go on based on kind of a vague recollection. But I kind of feel that kind of film had that kind of relationship with our generation.
Yeah.
As something that was kind of like an art, obviously like anything, but like an artifact from a previous time that we tried to reclaim in our sort of teen, from the generation it was obviously made for. But
yeah, it's the music. It's funny, like quite a lot of music from that era is something I largely prefer it to music that comes out now. Maybe that's down to the film, but there is something about because it came out with like Cool Britannia was like quite big, and it. I don't know. There's just something about it which is quite cool, I think, or at least 17-year-old me definitely thought.
Well, the
it was
opening
cool.
is incredibly cool.
Oh yeah, like Iggy Pop, and then you have
Yeah.
My DVD menu had the cover of Atomic, the Blondie
Oh,
one.
yeah,
So
yeah.
that was I had the definitive edition.
Oh, of course, yeah.
They
yeah.
redid the DVD menus for that one, and mine had it was the Atomic cover. I can't remember the band, but it's great, and like it just has so much positivity in it, considering its subject matter, and
It's that energy. It goes back to that energy that we kind of have already lauded onto.
yeah, man, but
Danny
it's-
Boyle. But it's such an integral part of him as a
Yeah.
filmmaker and the way that he interrogates these ideas and themes. And it's not necessarily to the detriment. I mean, you could argue. And I think certainly in the case of 28 years later, for me, there are a couple of moments where his use of music did detract from it slightly.
Okay, yeah, I'm curious to know your thoughts on
But
that.
I think broadly speaking, you are right that he's totally singular in that way of using music. It's kind of like, if you were sort of doing like film studies 101, he'd be the guy you pick for that kind of approach. And but that's not necessarily criticism in the sense that he just does it really fucking well.
yeah, he knows how to put a playlist together.
Oh God, yeah.
Yeah,
And even if you're not necessarily that interested in the music or privy to the music, you still appreciate it in the way that it's married to the scenes that it's playing on top of, right?
yeah.
So, even on that way, I think it's just, an incredibly impressive kind of stylistic choice that has followed him throughout his whole career.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, yeah, for better or worse, again, like because I can understand why some of the needle drops might be seen as slightly inappropriate for considering like what he's trying to do with the film or the films. But then even The Beach has a great soundtrack.
The Beach is one that I really don't remember.
It has Moby, it has Porcelain.
Okay.
With Moby in it.
Yeah.
So that I think he's not afraid of exploring music that is geared towards other generations as well.
Well, it creates a kind of there's something incongruent about that, which kind of has its own life,
Yeah,
isn't it?
yeah. Well, like the soundtrack album,
Or just the idea of taking like a piece of music that's originally from a certain era and all the kind of history or social cultural elements around it, and giving it new life in a different setting.
yeah.
Previously, kind of that wouldn't have even been conceived.
So like T2 is a really good example of that because he's using his own playlist to reflect back, and it's the songs on that have like vague mixes of the original songs. So like they're so Born Slippy, for example, you can hear it, but it's so slow. It's so it's meditative. It's not energetic anymore. It's actually quite sad that you hear it again, and there's like a pang of nostalgia. Well, I've already talked about T2 actually in this context and on episode 2, I think.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but like the way he uses his own songs as well to kind of hark back to an era that he and we all know is never
The kind of duplicitous nature of nostalgia is revealed through that kind of that device of using music but slowing it and sort of changing its pacing in a way that sort of it encourages you to think about that kind of the way in which nostalgia its power resides on a kind of an idea that is, I guess, given a sense of reverence by the kind of mental state you're in the present.
Yeah.
And we often talk about how negative it is, nostalgia, but broadly speaking, nostalgia is something that is in the psychological world. It's something that's considered quite positive.
Yeah.
As a sort of social adhesive, or as a kind of fortress to hide from existential worries or angst, or so. I know we kind of talk very negatively about nostalgia, but I think we mean it more in the kind of enforced cultural sense that these kind of Hollywood executives are kind of like forcing us to kind of, there's this parasitical relationship they have with our memories and our this kind of collective or individual memory we have of something that gives a film an additional kind of layer of reverence away from technique or narrative or performance.
Yeah.
But I think in the context of Danny Boyle, you know, and in that particular example you've given, it's interesting that, especially that, you know, when T2 came out, and very much now, Hollywood is completely kind of, it has this kind of infatuation with its own history and its own legacy, and there is something kind of inherently, you know, again, that duplicity. There is something potentially positive, but also there's a lot of negativity in kind of perpetually looking backwards.
It makes you feel a bit weird. I remember going to see like Spider-Man No Way Home and seeing Tobey Maguire and just thinking like, actually, I don't know how much like, I feel like a bit odd for not watching you in the first three. It's an odd feeling. It wasn't necessarily a welcome one.
Right.
And I was actually, it's one of the things I want to talk about later with regards to the ending of Years, was that they did something which we'll discuss later.
Yeah.
But what they didn't do, I was quite glad about with regards to using nostalgia in that fashion.
Yeah.
Because obviously Cillian Murphy has been touted to
Yeah. Spoilers.
Yeah. I think it's sort of broadly quite well known now that it is going to happen. Yes, spoilers. But
for those living in a cave.
Yeah, he's not in this one, basically, and I was quite pleased about that.
Yeah.
What I got given instead is another thing, but...
Yeah. No, I was right, and I remember we kind of had a brief conversation about that on the walk back to your car, was that, you know, it was... the kind of the way in which it handled its own legacy, I thought was quite tasteful.
Yeah, I don't think he's particularly interested in revisiting a great deal about the first film. 28 Days, I should say. And when he did revisit a franchise fate, I guess Trainspotting arguably is a franchise now. That's a weird thing to think. He did so, and he kind of paid attention to nostalgia in a very different way, in a way which kind of was quite respectful of it and how it makes you feel. And it doesn't always make you feel that good. And I think he acknowledges that very... There's a bit where Spud bumps into himself running down the road, and it's just sad. Like, it's just so sad watching this kind of haggard old ex-heroin addict just watch his younger self sprint down the road of just... So what you're saying about the first scene in Trainspotting, be so relentless. There's an acknowledgement there that it can't always be the case, and it will fade.
It's almost like, when you think about it in the context of that and that particular first scene, and broadly speaking, certainly the earlier energy of the first Trainspotting is that, you know, youth is very one of the great joys of youth. I mean, you know, not for everyone, of course, but broadly speaking, is that it's the now, isn't it? It's like it's the inability to kind of imagine you in a different headspace.
Yes.
And even like any physical difference or anything, is the idea of it being any further than what's happening right now.
Yeah, silly, isn't it?
And it almost gives a sense of agency to obviously there's a tragic sense of agency within that. In the course of where the narrative takes the characters, but and thinking about it in that way with T2 and the way it reflects on that.
It's pretty poignent.
As an old, you know, as some, you know, as people that are in their 30s, of course, you know, we're by no means out to pasture. Although in the plot of Logan's Run, we'd be dead.
Oh fuck. We would, wouldn't we?
We would have, yeah. But
hopefully, by the time we're like 60, they would have sorted out the age thing.
Yeah.
Never know.
What, in the plot of Logan's Run?
Oh, no, I just mean in real life.
Okay.
Logan's Run 2, yeah. L2.
But, you know, like, we're you do sort of imagine having a conversation with your younger self and being quite embarrassed with it, you know?
I have that already. I get Facebook memories. Quite often the statuses from like even 3 years ago, I'm like, what the fuck are you doing?
Yeah.
And then there's other ones which are from even longer time ago. I'm like, I don't know if I recognise you.
Yeah.
I'm sure I
with
would.
Memories, they can sort of fade, or you can choose to ignore them, or they only tend to come when you're lying in bed at night.
Yeah, and I think that you
with
also...
Facebook, or any kind of social media, it's unavoidable.
Yeah,
it's built on a kind of currency of memory, isn't it?
Yeah. And they're unaltered as well on Facebook. Whereas actually that's something 28 years later interrogates a little bit, is the idea of cherry picking memories and cherry picking the past. The past is something that Boyle uses quite frequently in his films. I'm thinking even like 127 Hours. Like there's the recent past of him. There's like cutbacks to him forgetting a bottle of water, and just how much he wants to change that. And you know, I think his characters quite often are very reflective for that reason. Is that they spend a lot of time looking back, and it's usually used in. He's seen as quite a negative thing because he's, as a person, he's sort of evident in the 2012 Olympic ceremony, and although like that catapulted him to sort of a kind of national darling, I suppose, in a way. He did something with progression, and he sort of wanted to represent the country as like a modern progressive country, and it's something I think it's quite easy to forget that we.
It was a weird choice, him doing that.
Yeah, I think he'd won an Oscar about
Slumdog Millionaire
before.
Right?
Yeah.
See, I don't really like that film either, but
yeah,
I mean, I just think he's at his best when he's kind of, you know, and I think the 28 years or the 28 franchise, I don't know what the fuck you call it, but you know, I sort of think he's at his best when he's kind of peeling back the layers of kind of Englishness or Britishness.
Yeah, okay.
You know,
I think Slumdog has
as a cultural export, you know, and
yeah.
the kind of dissonance between that and the reality. And I was thinking that when I was watching 28 Days Later a few days ago, was that, you know, it's almost like, you know, the arrival of this kind of apocalyptic scenario that's befallen England is kind of like it kind of pulls the performative elements of kind of like Britishness just away. There's no point in the kind of politeness or any of these kind of ideas that we kind of hold central to the British identity, and are often kind of used to obscure a lot of our kind of dark colonial past and all that kind of stuff, which I think is a really kind of
under talked about that.
Well, definitely. But in the context of 28 Days Later, and I think the films more broadly, but particularly 28 Days Later, is that it's a strong theme.
Yeah.
You know, that kind of past that is hidden, and there's a lot about recollection, but it's kind of lost.
Yes. There's a bit where, actually, I mean, you talking about that now just reminds me of that bit where Brendan Gleeson's character, Frank, is looking at some horses.
Yeah.
And he's just looking at them, you'd see your horse, because we're quite equestrian as a country, I think. We're quite proud of that sort of side of ourselves, at least the kind of posher side of ourselves. And he's just watching these horses, and he's like, they're doing, he literally says, it's quite on the nose, he just goes, they're doing just fine. Like, they've been stripped of their cultural impact on the country, and they're just running around. That's a beautiful moment.
Unshackled from it almost.
This
is something that came to me, and I'm not sure how much there is in this. This might be over-analysing.
Oh, go on, love it.
But do you think, given the nature of the themes of 28 Days Later, about that kind of idea of the kind of
stripping back
and the idea of Englishness as a kind of front and what's really underneath it. And that nod to that sort of colonial history that is so pervasive and yet so, you know, knowingly obscured by the powers that be. Do you think it's a coincidence that the main character is Irish in that sense?
I don't think so. I mean,
or do you think it's a deliberate kind of casting choice on the basis of this kind of that kind of colonial backdrop?
That is interesting. I hadn't ever considered that, actually.
No, it literally was just like
fucking works.
A shower thought.
I think. Well, the funny thing is about 28 Days Later in particular, and he does this with a lot of his films, is the message is usually found during its creation. So, in the case of 28 Days Later, 9/11 happened whilst they were filming, and he says, I've probably talked about this before, but he said after that happened, the film became about the vulnerability of cities.
Right.
And that's why people found the images of a deserted London so striking, and it really seared its way into their brain, is because the film, which wasn't intending to be that, became that.
Right.
He did embrace that, I think. And you can tell, like, you know, using that kind of anarchist East Hastings sort of song, which is like a wonderful song, but not an easy listen. It's aggressive and uncompromising, and I think
and long.
Yeah, and that scene could have probably, I think it was 3 lines in the script. So he's elongated that, I think, for a reason. And in that same way, casting an Irish actor, an unknown Irish actor, who is now free to inhabit this new this new world, which is stripped back and bare, and almost it's like a starting again, that wish fulfillment thing, which I talked about a little bit yesterday. There's something in that. I mean, I think so anyway. I wouldn't say that that's a... You'd have to ask him. He doesn't have Twitter, annoyingly, I've checked. And despite what you might think, I don't have his email address. But
A couple of high flyers like us.
yeah.
No, I just was thinking, because there's obviously watching a film so recently gives you a kind of... Everything's so vivid to you, isn't it? But
especially in the...
Yeah, because my memory for films is, as everyone knows, pretty dreadful. Despite the fact that I peak my... primary interest.
Yeah. Korean War, Vietnam War.
Yeah. But, it's sort of like there's so much iconography. Like the bit when he's like in that opening, when he's like walking across the bridge next to
Westminster
Big Ben.
Bridge.
Westminster Bridge, and he's like treading on all of the little kind of shitty sort of models of
Yes, I love that bit.
Of the Tower of London
set design. That I love.
Yeah,
that.
and it's just the idea about kind of like treading on that kind of all the iconography that's kind of used as a sort of like a kind of it's a device to obscure.
Yeah, okay.
The idea that this is it's all pure and I don't know. Like I just think there's something like a way I think about the way British culture is exported. It's very rare that that people see kind of like kitchen sink. Obviously, maybe more so in Europe, but I guess what I'm saying is
to Americans,
right? Like
big hit in America, 20 days.
Well, exactly. So like, there's almost like a sense of Englishness that is hidden from the Americans.
Yes, definitely.
I always remember that episode of Charlie Brooker where he shows he's like his America special, and he shows them EastEnders. And they're just baffled by it.
Yeah,
they're like, "What the fuck is this?" And that might not necessarily be a microcosm of the entire sort of American attitude to English culture, but I think I've said this a few times. They're a lot more selective about the culture we give them than we are of them.
Definitely. I mean,
I think that helps to kind of create this sort of image of Britishness as polite and wryly humoured and respectful and.
Ignoring the entire, it's always confined to the southeast. I find that Americans' perception of England is confined to like London,
which is interesting, given 28 years later.
Yes,
it's set in the north.
Exactly, and not afraid to use its accents as well. And it's a big film which is marketed to Americans because obviously 28 Days was such a hit. I think that's interesting. Like that, because 28 Days was shot for very little money with a very tiny little camera and
mini DV.
So that's a kind of a Dogma 95 type thing, I suppose. Is already like slightly inspired by that. They look quite similar actually, all the Dogma 95 films in 28 Days because they're all shot on cheap digital video. But there's something in that about wanting to recover something that's perhaps been lost in like Sense and Sensibility. Not that there's anything wrong with that film, but like it gives a skewed impression of England to Americans that I think Boyle was quite keen to kind of strip back. And
definitely something in that, isn't there? The kind of the way it's fetishized, and it's particularly that kind of like the kind of Jane Austen novels or anything like that. It's that kind of revisionism of British history.
Yeah, like
And don't get me wrong, I like Jane Austen novels, and there's actually a lot more kind of sadness and social critique than perhaps they're given credit for.
Yeah.
But these kind of films and TV shows that adapt these kinds of things, I think a large part of the reason for the kind of appetite for them is that kind of revisionism, that kind of looking back.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, it's kind of like a poorly constructed thought. It's probably showed itself in the way I framed it.
No. I think,
but you know what I mean? Like, I think there's something about that kind of this kind of the obscuring of empire, or indeed not necessarily the obscuring of empire in the sense that the iconography and the wealth that was born from it, but the kind of obviously the horror of it, and
Yes.
you know, that's something that's. And I just thought it was interesting that Cillian Murphy and of course Naomi
Harris, yes.
You know, I mean, another character, Black. You
Yeah.
know, I just think that I don't know. I just
Main
feel
love
that
interest as well.
Yeah, love interest, but it's
But has her own agency at the beginning.
yeah.
And actually, even Brendan Gleeson is Irish.
He's Irish.
He plays a
He
sort
does
of London
bloody
cabbie,
cracking, Cockney accent.
but really good. Yeah,
Because I kind of I remembered he was in it, but I couldn't quite remember that how good his accent was, and I was like, fucking hell, that's...
he's the emotional center of the film. So when he spoilers, when he gets infected, there's a bit where he apologizes to his daughter before he does it, and it's like really quite sad all of a sudden.
Yeah.
And then also going back to the soldiers in the third act inhabiting this kind of Jane Austen style building.
Right.
I mean, that must be quite baffling to Americans as well. Like hold on, these are for sort of gentlemen. What are these sort of bullish, teetering on the edge of rapists? Basically, that's what they are. And there's a definite critical jab at the army, which actually I think Garland has never replicated.
No,
he's sort of more skewed in favour of it. But
totally,
in 28 Days, he's at the time the well trodden ground of the humans of the real monsters was quite new, and he gave it all the monsters role to the soldiers.
Interesting, isn't it? Almost like these kind of behaviours that are obviously encouraged through training and ritual are kind of restrained by society, but when that society goes, all of those rituals that are encouraged in the military are just becoming shackled.
All of a sudden they're terrified of a world without women. And their behaviour as a result of that in less than a month turns into sort of rabid like a rabid hunger for sex, basically, which is
at the expense of kind of agency or just basic humanity of the women that they come across. It's really it's interesting. You think about it with Garland, and I think I've sort of alluded to this with Garland before on Civil War, which is of course he wrote and directed, but I think Boyle is perfect for Garland in the sense that a lot of Garland's themes he doesn't quite fully realise in the screenplay that Boyle realises perhaps better than Garland does. You know what I mean? He
devotes time to moments which are actually really quite key that I think Garland can just sort of
He's just quite
past.
vague. I mean, because there's even that kind of consumerist scene in the supermarket.
I want to talk about that in the context of years, actually.
It is slightly... There's a sort of, again, that kind of buoyancy, but it's bizarre given how kind of remorselessly bleak the rest of the film is, that's in there.
Yes. And that they drive past all that kind of Van Gogh's style poppies at the end. Really weird. It's an odd moment, and I think that's a Boyle thing that is...
He gives it, it's interesting, these kind of vague kind of narrative sort of abstractions that and I think he does kind of struggle to kind of commit ideologically to things, Garland, in his screenplays. And it's interesting that you say about him in the context of his more recent output being more sort of not necessarily steadfast, but he's certainly pushing the other way, in the context of warfare and even elements of civil war. That kind of vagueness kind of leaves the films open to these kind of comparisons to like Michael Bay. Because it's sort of almost like, well, it kind of looks the same. There's not a lot else going on that's, but it's interesting. And it's funny, I'd not really considered that in that context, that 28 Days Later is probably the last time he had this kind of real, not necessarily disliking of, but a kind of a way of kind of, because the military is seen in most societies, particularly Western societies, in the kind of post-World War II landscape. It's seen as this kind of essential part of human civilization, and almost deserving of more respect than any other profession in the eyes of some. And I think, patriotism at its worst encourages that attitude at the expense of everything else. And that tends to lead down the path to kind of more kind of horrible historical, global, or conflict or whatever. I mean, it's just kind of going off piece, but it's just interesting that that Garland has that briefly in that film, and it really works.
It does, in
the context of the apocalypse, the scares, and it keeps that kind of tone of discomfort, and it finds a crescendo that perhaps just having zombies in wouldn't have been enough.
No, I don't think so. I think actually the zombies at the end, I'm going to call them zombies, the infected.
Yeah, of course. Sorry, infected.
They get utilised in a positive way by Jim at the end of 28 Days.
Yeah.
A tool for him to break free of this new sort of horrendous situation he's found himself in an effort to. And I think this is quite crucial, actually. There's a 10-minute section in 28 Days Later which is really ambient. You know the bit where they're driving up the M1? They spend the night at that abbey. And there's no, like, everything's just calm, and you can tell Jim's sort of found his new family, really. And it gets disrupted by these men, these soldiers, and it's up to Jim to use his new world. Like he uses the infected to break free of that. I think it's just great. What a turn! Actually, at the time, wasn't. People were quite critical of the third act of it, but now I think it's aged really well. I think.
I think so.
And happy ending as well.
Which
is a bold move for a zombie movie. It's a zombie movie. I think they're going back to what you were saying about kind of like finding nuggets of strange things that may or may not have been intentional. I think there's a weird obsession with the word hello in 28 Days Later. Do you remember this? He keeps saying it at the beginning. All he's saying is, and then you wouldn't you? Hello? Like, is there anyone there? Like, where are all the humans? And he says it, and he shouts it in the middle as well at that field when he's taking the Valium. And there's all those sheep.
Oh, yeah.
This film's basically burnt into my memory. I could probably watch the whole thing in my head if I wanted to. But yeah, there's just a strange obsession with the word hello. And at the end, they don't put help in. They don't spell out help with sheep. They spell hello. I don't know why. I still haven't quite. I was going to chat GPT it earlier, but I thought I'd save a bottle of water.
Good. I'm glad.
I just I think there's something in that word, a simple human expression of a greeting,
acknowledgement.
And no one says it back to him in the film, and at the end,
even the human characters don't.
No, they
it's almost
don't.
that kind of loss of again that kind of societal norms and expectations.
It's gone. And he wakes up. He's basically a baby when he wakes up. Like, because you don't know who, you kind of get a bit of backstory. But I like him as a blank slate at the beginning.
Yeah, in his birthday suit.
Yes, of course.
See his meat and two veg.
There's a lot of cock in in this franchise broadly. So
that's that's a point I'd not quite considered till just now.
Not afraid of male nudity.
Well, it's about time.
Yeah.
Was it Kevin Bacon that said there needs to be more cocks on screen? I'm sort of paraphrasing him. I don't know that's what he said directly.
I think it's Kevin Bacon.
I think it was Kevin Bacon.
Okay, I mean, I agree. I think it's only
during
fair,
the press for X-Men. No, it wasn't that. I can't remember what it was, but he was talking about more flopping great juicy cocks.
Really? Okay.
I mean,
the scales are definitely tipped in favour of female nudity as in comparison to male, and I think
more male.
More male.
More men, please.
You're gonna be a trailblazer. You might as well
do it off the shaft.
Yes.
Sort of flaps aggressively betwixt the thighs of a sort of very angry zombie.
Yeah.
Which we'll get into that as well later.
Clever one.
The zombie.
Yeah. No, I think. Yeah. I could talk about 28 Days Later for a really long time. Actually, I won't because
it is ruddy good.
Yeah.
And because I said to you as we were setting up, it's the first time I've seen it since I was about 17.
Yes. Yeah.
And what an experience! Again, we talk about the negativity of nostalgia, but it was like there's something in that kind of like horrible sort of digital distortion that DV tape only has.
Yeah.
And it also reminds me of college because when we used to make our shitty film projects, we used mini DV.
Yeah.
You have to put it in those machines and copy over to Final Cut, and it took ages.
Batch capture it.
That's it. Batch capture.
I used to make little films on those tapes. They're great. I mean, they don't quality wise. They're
Awful.
horrendous. But they give 28 Days Later a kind of urban quality that really lasts and like dates it, but in a way that feels appropriate.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's the kind of, we look back at it now, of course, as everyone pretty much has a camera, but back then, it was only like the kind of family members that they were the ones always in charge of filming events because they'd invested in a camera. And it's that kind of prosumer tech. I don't know, like there's something in that as well. Thinking about it from that point of our lives, and certainly with me and during the media course and all that kind of stuff, it just that. But as a narrative device, as a cinematic and narrative device, it's so you just couldn't imagine it looking good.
Yeah, no.
An idea of a film where they just reshot it with like 30mm film, for example.
Oh no. I don't think it would work as well.
Or it just wouldn't have it. There's something about that kind of distortion and the way it kind of struggles with light.
Yeah.
And all those kinds of things. I mean, that obviously adds to the kind of tension of the film. On a kind of more broad kind of entry level assessment, But I remember you saying you were talking about it when we were walking back from the cinema.
Okay, yeah.
Because we talked about the fact that 28 Years is shot on iPhones.
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Which is kind of a continuation of that prosumer camera technology.
Yes.
Obviously, of course, a lot of cameras these days on phones are really good. Whereas I don't know if anyone ever thought DV was good. Maybe they probably did. But
I think it was just acceptable, wasn't it?
Yeah,
it was
you just accepted it.
Yeah.
So here's my son eating a cake on his birthday.
Yes, that's right. What did I say when I was?
Here's my cock. Not the same birthday. No. Terry, you keep going to the bathroom during your son's birthday. You're doing it again, aren't you?
Yeah.
You said you wouldn't.
You used up 6 tapes. High 8, yeah. What did I say when it was? It
wasn't nothing to do with that. It was
in relation to film and DV and iPhones.
Because I was saying about how that kind of continuation, that prosumer thing, and I queried where the origin was. Was it you saying that it was? As if it was kind of like an artifact of the time.
Yes.
So it was always there's kind of like a meta thing there.
Yeah. The idea, I think the idea was, is if you woke up in the world of 28 Days Later, you would find it as a kind of thing, and you could play it in the world, and it would work. It would kind of make sense that someone had shot this like. Yeah, basically, it was like it's like an artifact you could pick up in a post-apocalyptic world and put it on, and that was that one of the ideas behind the look.
Interesting that probably definitely inspired Wreck.
Yeah.
No 28 Days Later, no Wreck, right? Sure.
No, and no Dawn of the Dead, Zack Snyder's one. I mean, no, a lot of films.
It revitalized the love for zombies, didn't it?
Fast zombies,
Dead
Rising, and the idea that zombies had to be an illustration of dead people, aka like kind of you hear dead, you
the feast on the living as well.
Yeah. But the idea that they needed to be slow was sort of tossed aside, and it became more like an infection that would bolster you and move you forward. And, and the threat became real and sort of urgent. And it wasn't like you could sort of move out the way of them anymore.
Yeah.
You had to really,
one of them was enough to cause a lot of problems.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the idea, so Years being shot on iPhones is the equivalent. So now, if it happened now, there'd be phones everywhere, and you'd have to piece together what would happen by looking at a phone. That's the idea. I mean, I don't know how much that was just kind of a marketing gimmick, but
it is interesting.
It feels like intentional because Boyle had made Trainspotting, and like he'd made films by that point. He could have easily afforded to shoot on 35
I mean, I think it goes back to what we're saying about him. Just that kind of that stylistic exuberance doesn't just boil down to music. Boil down to be hours to write that. I didn't go to sleep till 3 a.m.
We had to delay the podcast by a week and a half.
I just need something.
Yeah.
Like that it doesn't just lend itself to the use of music or the kind of freneticism of his cutting or the camera movement. It's the technology he employs.
Yeah.
So I think it is deliberate. And of course, there are plenty of other filmmakers who used iPhones, obviously slightly shitter ones like Sean Baker for Tangerine.
Yeah.
So, and that's a fucking great movie. I really like that. And there's a closeness that kind of tech gives thematically that helps the narrative and it brings it closer.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure it's as effective as, say, Tangerine. I think maybe because it looks so good.
Yeah.
It's such a well-shot movie. I think in the case of 28 years later, obviously, we can look back on it and we can say, well, it was before all these kinds of things and the idea of a phone camera, and it felt like very much the same reason that I love, like, Southland Tales. Squeezed it in.
Oh, yeah, there we go.
It's the film that feels like it's on the precipice of something.
Yeah, okay.
And there's so much uncertainty and so much fear.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's obviously a lot of convenience to a lot of the stuff that's subsequently been made, but there is still that kind of feeling of fear and anxiety that bubbles under the use of kind of mobile phone use. And I just think it's kind of, I don't think it works as well as the DV tape thing does, but I'm prepared to admit that's probably because of that kind of feeling about that kind of on the edge of something. Something's coming. And they even tap into that in 28 years later as well.
Yeah, they do.
Which again, we'll talk about later. That's all we do now. We just keep making frequent allusions. Yeah.
Sometimes we actually don't.
Yeah, I know. Yeah, very good. You used to write these down.
We might not. But
Scar them in the table. No, it's I really love the aesthetic of it, which is strange considering it's fucking horrible looking.
Yeah, you get it on Blu-ray. It doesn't make a difference either. It still looks shit.
My friend Ollie went to see it on the big screen, and he said he couldn't believe how shit it looked. And that's like, well, yeah, but like he's not wrong. Even watching it on this old baby, it was like, oof.
Yeah, it wasn't.
It's just so uncinematic.
Yep,
which is,
it's the point, really.
Not criticism.
Yeah. It is. It's Dodd Mantle who was working with all the Dogma.
Yes, he reached out to him, didn't he, and brought him on board.
Yeah, apparently Dodd Mantle thought it was a joke.
Yeah, did he?
Said he thought it was his mates playing a joke, saying Danny Boyle wanted to work with him, and it took him a week to reply.
Did it?
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah, it's great. It's. I think it's a film that, if asked, I say it's my favourite film. If someone asked me what my favourite film is, it will be 28 Days Later. I don't necessarily think it is. I think my actual favourite film probably differs day to day. I actually kind of find that question slightly annoying.
Yeah, so do I.
Even top 5, I'm like, I don't know. Goodfellas.
Give me top 50.
Yeah, top 50, easy.
You've got 3 hours.
We'll be here for a bit longer.
Yeah. You're going to be so interested.
It's your round. No, I love it.
It is great. It's a fucking, like I said, a ruddy good film.
Yeah, and
really great.
Yeah, and it's interesting that he shot Millions after it. Have you seen Millions?
No, you've mentioned it before.
It's very, it's very kind of. It's like a family movie.
Maybe that's what he needed after making.
I think he did, yeah. And it's a great film, actually. It's very earnest, I'd say, and I think earnestness can be his downfall sometimes. Boyle.
Definitely agree.
And if you don't get on with that earnestness, and if you don't get on with questionable-ish, although they work in the context, child acting, it actually does work. It's quite sweet to watch. It's not like conventionally good acting, though. If you can get past that, it's a good film.
Okay.
I lent it to a colleague, and they said it was good apart from their accents. These kids are all from Manchester. I was like, right. I won't mention which colleague it was.
It's anti-Manc rhetoric. Yeah. So, weeks later, I'm not going to lie, I didn't watch it in preparation. I didn't have enough time. Because I'm really busy.
I told you don't worry about it. But I did say
I have seen it a long time ago, but broadly speaking, I think it's a kind of comment. So we kind of the shift from the kind of the sort of obscurification of Britain's kind of dark colonial past to the very modern American imperialism.
Yes, the American army comes in, saves the day, and then it fucks up.
Yeah,
that's kind of the plot. I like it. I like it fine.
The opening was directed by Boyle, wasn't it?
Yeah, or like Second Unit. I think he oversaw the shooting of it. of
Right.
the opening, which is Robert Carlyle and is very good. It sort of matches that frenetic energy, and then the film just sort of doesn't really work after that. Its story isn't as interesting. They ignore the whole thing about. I mean, granted, 28 Days had a very happy ending, leaving things open for, and they kind of took that on board, and the idea that the country was starting to rebuild itself and society was starting to kind of flourish again. But that's the problem with it, really, is that it's too much of a. There's too much normalcy in it. Like, it sort of feels like, like a kind of very bog standard zombie movie after that. With like some kind of interesting-ish story ideas about immunity, and the kids aren't that irritating. Like, you kind of follow these children trying to find their mum who's in like a sort of suburban London house. But yeah, it just sort of doesn't land for me. I remember it coming out and being so fond of the original and knowing it wasn't a Boyle directed movie.
Who directed it?
Juan Carlos Fresnadillo, I think his name is. He did a film called Encanto or Encanto, I think. Not Encanto, that's the Pixar one.
That'd be a leap.
Yeah, he's a Spanish director, and he's done some good stuff, but I think it just buckled under the weight of itself a little bit.
Right.
It felt unfinished. It felt slightly lazy, and your thing about the American imperialism kind of was, I didn't really see it in that way, but actually you're right. There's a lot of American soldiers in it trying their best to kind of keep London together. But I don't know. Do you have any thoughts on that sort of? Do you think there's something more to that? The imperialism?
Well, I think the kind of broadly held notion that guides a lot of modern American imperialism is the idea that there's only one country that can set the course and save. I think there's something in that for sure, particularly as obviously Britain being an ally and obviously being kind of hand in hand with a lot of the kind of more recent sort of shitty, horrible stuff that's happened. I don't know. I just feel like there's something in that. And the fact that it's the Americans that have come to save us. It's like kind of the transition of power, and that kind of closeness to Europe isn't what it once was, as we kind of drift ever closer into kind of the bosom of the United States.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's a good moment in it. Oh, I say good. It's a moment in it where they call it Code Red, right? And the idea is that all of a sudden you can't distinguish normal people running away from the infected, and they just start sort of mowing people down, effectively kind of committing genocide. It's kind of an interesting idea. And it sort of very ham-fistedly harks back to who are the infected and who aren't the infected, kind of like, are we the real infected? Are we in fact infected? And it has that bit in it. It has Jeremy Renner in it and Rose Byrne, and they both play sort of American scientists and soldiers. And it just, for me...
Do they survive?
Potentially. There's quite a cool bit where they get a helicopter and tilt it on its side, and they sort of kill a bunch of infected with the rotor blades of the helicopter.
God, I can't remember that at all.
It's very set piece heavy. 28 weeks later, and
it's always going to be the way, isn't it?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't really have a great deal to say about it, only because my opinion of it is sort of like it's fine.
It's always going to be. I mean, when you think about it in that way, and saying that it's set piece heavy, it's not surprising because those kind of sequels, particularly with horror movies, and we see it a lot. The original has this kind of pioneering quality to it. And obviously the films that follow it, for whatever reason, don't really try and replicate that, perhaps partly because they know they can't. But the mere continuation of the franchise is enough to sort of keep it going, keep money coming in.
That's it.
And I think, I mean, again, my memory is almost non-existent on that film, and that's why I was quite keen to watch it, but I didn't. But... there is sort of so many kind of horror films fall victim to that. They fall victim to their own success and the fact that there's something in the mythology that might be worth continuing, but there isn't a great deal of effort to realise it in a way that there's any kind of equivalency to the original. And I don't mean that in the sense that it has to follow the original blueprint,
No.
but the kind of thought process that went into the original. And I guess, as a counter argument, you could say, well, obviously, the original had the benefit of being the original, so it had nothing to compare it to, which would be a fair retort. But I just think, just arguing with myself. But do you know what I mean? Like, so there is that, but I just feel like so many of those kind of horror sequels, particularly in the kind of early to mid 2000s, late 2000s, were very much guilty for that. Of just kind of going, well, just slap the name on it and have vague sort of, thematic parallels.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because I think you could do something really interesting with that, the idea of the Americans coming. And, again, there's a lot of thematic weight to that, which given the kind of history that surrounded that period, and even now, the history of, this idea of leave it to us, we'll sort it because you guys can't,
Oh, mate, that is a really interesting idea. They really they should have tapped on
it's
that.
It's a shame because it's a fucking cool idea.
It's a great idea, and you could follow one of the soldiers, and instead they kind of there's like another family in it, and there's the bit where he pushes the thumb pushing into the eyes. They saw that as a kind of a franchise staple,
a motif.
Yeah, and they revisited it. Why?
Yeah.
Like, what are the odds of that happening?
Yeah.
Like that's not a thing. He did it in the first film because he had to, not because he. Yeah, and in the second one they kind of shoehorn it in. And it could have existed on it. They could have called it something else, and it would have still worked as an all-right-ish zombie film that made a bit of cash. Good day for night in it. I'll give it that. I remember. So it's quite hard to do. You have to shoot it, your film in broad daylight with like bright sunlight, and then underexpose it. It's just hard to get right, and they do a good job in 28 Weeks Later. So I'll give it that. Thank you, 28 Weeks Later, for some good day for night photography. No, I don't know how I feel about that. I've seen it recently as well in preparation.
Yeah.
Although they like totally retcon it in years.
Yeah.
They just like disregard it with a title, which I thought was quite funny.
Well, the opening disregards it, really, doesn't it?
Yeah. Like they kind of make a point of saying this is a sort of English, this is a British thing.
Yeah.
And this is what's happened.
Yeah.
Don't ignore this bit. They kind of acknowledge that it went to Paris and it got pushed back, and that's it. Like, and it kind of picks up on its own terms, which I was quite grateful for because I don't think they needed to acknowledge weeks, really.
No, and I think it's kind of in opposition with this kind of broader kind of idea that tends to follow a lot of franchises these days, obviously with the advent of the elephant in the room, Marvel, but this idea of a broad, expansive narrative is commonplace. And even if it's kind of enthusiasm for Marvel is waning, I think there's still this kind of big idea, like, a lot of these franchises do these kind of cross-media kind of world-building exercises. And so I liked that a lot about 28 Years, is that actually kind of it just shrunk it back down again.
Yeah.
And in a way, that kind of shrinking back down again lent itself to themes more broadly that work in favour of the film. And let's just start talking about it. Because we keep going, we're going to talk about it. One of the sort of key themes I felt in the film, particularly in the opening, and I think we kind of discussed this a little bit on the frequently mentioned walk to your car, was that sense of Englishness, recapturing that sense of Englishness.
Yeah.
So if the first film is about the loss of Englishness,
yes,
or the loss of an idealised view of Englishness, 28 Years is the return of that idealised Englishness, but in a different way. So, Boyle intercuts these kind of like shots from old films, presumably like the Battle of Agincourt or Crecy or whatever, where the longbow was like
Henry V.
So the longbow was the kind of one of the most feared weapons on the medieval battlefield, and the French, despite their kind of military might and sort of combat prowess, couldn't match it, couldn't get near to it, and it's this symbol of Englishness, which I think is particularly powerful in the sense that when you think about what you said about the kind of the shrinking down of the kind of mythology of the film back to England, the idea that that Europe isn't interested. It's a the sort of the kind of there's something. Sorry, I don't know why it's taking me so long to say it, but like you could definitely feel the presence of the kind of result of Brexit in the writing process, the construction of the idea.
Totally. Oh yeah, 100%.
English isolationism, the return of old values.
Yeah, the idea that we can go out on our own and we can fish in our own seas.
Yeah, hunt our own deer. Yeah,
and bring up our boys to be exactly like us.
yeah. Kind of unmolested
Yes.
by Europe,
Yeah.
not by anything else.
Oh no, yeah, it really does. That is a huge part of the first act. There's only 2 acts to this film, really, and I loved it. I think a lot of people had a bit of a problem with the archive. I really enjoyed it. I thought it was great.
I thought it was great.
Oh yeah, really.
Yeah.
liked its
It
inclusion.
really cemented it home, and it was again. It goes back to a saying about Boyle, that kind of confidence to do that kind of shit, and just throw it in and go, oh, let's give it a go.
Cut
I
it,
like
see
that.
if it works. Oh, it does. Yeah,
And it really did for me
Yeah.
because there is just something so, I don't know, you can relate that to a lot of the experiences, that's kind of gripping contemporary history.
Yes.
Or not history, now.
yeah.
This call to go back to sort of these kind of values and ideas without really kind of, I think you said it's kind of this kind of distorted view
of the past.
of the past, which is so important to these kind of movements that seem to kind of, that seems to be the kind of the foundational to the rejection of anything that some alien exterior force.
Yeah.
And I thought they played with that really well.
Yes, they did. They had the confidence to say, to kind of give off the idea that this community is cherry picked memories from the past, held them dear, and forgot about all the other shit. Forgot that we as human beings can be pretty terrible to each other.
Yeah,
especially England in its history, and the idea that this community has been living without technology, and what would that do to you? Like, would that and that would probably do.
Which purifies you.
Yeah,
in
it
the
would
context of this film.
Make you an extremist, and it would make you, so isolated. In this case, it can't be helped, really, can it? Because England has been quarantined, the United Kingdom has been quarantined by like NATO with patrol boats, and they really, really get into the meat of what that can do to a community, and what that can. And how a community who has members who remember a past before this horrific event, and then members who don't. So Spike, the kid, the sort of little boy in this, which is sort of 12 or 13, he starts to resist that in the second half of the film, and I loved that about his character. I loved the idea that he kind of would repel. Like, I think he sort of sees his dad lying about him and kind of bigging him up, and he sort of doesn't enjoy that. And as the film progresses, you sort
how
of...
much about the collective identity, that British identity is based on lying. And,
exactly. And how a simple lie like his dad saying he killed 6 infected is like, well, they were crawling on the ground. Like he's confused by his dad's willingness to put him on this pedestal. And he he doesn't want to be this sort of hero, and he doesn't want to be the man that his dad wants him to be. And like, there's just it kickstarts a chain of events which carries and is probably the best thing about the second half of the film. The way it deals with the themes of the first film is great. I thought really, really enjoyed that, and really think it's worthwhile seeing just for that alone. And cool soundtrack as well. Just as an aside, like
classic Boyle.
Young Fathers did the score. I've been listening to it, actually. It's really good. I'm curious to know now, actually, what did you have some sort of issues? Because I didn't actually have any problems with the soundtrack.
It was kind of, broadly speaking, in the context of the whole film, the music I thought was really well deployed, but I just thought in the film's quieter moments, the music just, to me, was like quite jarring.
Yeah, okay.
So it's kind of like, he's just getting up in the morning and deciding if he wants to take his Power Ranger or not, or whatever figure it is. What is it?
Power Ranger.
Is it a Power Ranger? Which is funny given all the memes.
Oh, yeah.
Which we'll go into later.
I think that's intentional.
Yeah, do you think?
Yeah.
Maybe, yeah. But, it's like there's this music, it's quite like, like buoyant, the pacing is sort of, maybe there's something in that, that kind of kind of the incongruence of music and what's actually happening.
I know that the name of the track is called Lowly. Yeah, it's very fast. It's very,
It's just like
happy clappy almost.
Yeah. Which again, maybe thinking about it in the context of what we've just discussed is kind of maybe again kind of Boyle very overtly pointing to those kind of ideas through music. But I don't know. Like I think you could have still used it, but maybe kind of like maybe a bit more sparing. It's a very nitpicky. It's not.
no.
I didn't come away thinking, well, that's ruined it, but it was just like a slight niggle.
Yeah, no, mate. I think, in the interest of fairness, I loved that song, but I think it does detract from what we were just talking about a little bit. If you want to bring forward the idea that this community is unsuccessful in the sense that it's not really very progressive, it's actually very regressive. To use a song with such positivity is an odd choice. It is an odd choice. And Boyle can't help himself, I think, sometimes with that. And you can see that in T2 as well. He can't help but introduce rhythm to scenes that don't necessarily need it. And I think
ruminating is quiet ruminating is it's
that's
nice.
It's him finding realism difficult to love, I think.
Right,
That's what
okay.
he's doing.
Yeah, okay, fair play.
But it doesn't do the film any favours, despite the fact that song on its own is a banger. It's a weird that the banger is in a scene that should be quite an odd. It's an odd introduction to a community you're meant to sort of question, I think. Yeah. No, I think I take that on board. Actually, I'm going to go and watch this again. By the way,
nice.
Just because I've my sort of you probably can all tell I'm quite enthusiastic about this franchise. What do you think of the way they dealt with the infected and how there's a kind of evolution of that?
Yeah, I thought it was initially I was a bit like but then it would kind of have to make sense, right? Because not have to. I'm talking about a kind of fictitious mythology here, but I thought it was interesting. I remember saying to you, it sort of video gamed it.
Right, in that there's.
Do you know how like a video game, obviously they can only make so many kind of like models for characters. Yes, too many models puts too much stress on hardware.
Yeah.
So they'll have like the big zombie that typically has like riot gear on for some reason. Then they've got the zombie that's like the smoke one that always releases gas.
Yeah.
There's all these different kinds of zombies that all do different things and they all got the identical.
Yeah.
I thought that was kind of it's kind of like maybe that's Garland and his love of video games again, perhaps. But, But, I just think there's something. Yeah, it's very video gamey about it.
And then there's like sort of tiers of zombies.
Yeah. So you've got your basic fodder.
Yeah.
Then you've got those crawly ones.
The ones that eat worms.
Yeah.
I think.
And then you've got the big, well-hung, muscular alpha zombies. Yeah.
I think the alphas are okay as a development of the idea that they have to hunt in order to keep getting calories.
Yeah. I kind of liked it. It almost kind of was like a devolutionary disease.
Yeah.
So
yes.
Because there's the shot of them like in the river.
Oh yeah,
watering themselves.
Yeah, they kind of,
and it reminded me of like something from like Walking with Beasts. Do you remember that show that followed Walking with Dinosaurs? I loved that show.
Yeah,
and then like, towards the end, obviously, they introduce the kind of the apes that would eventually become
humans. Yeah, okay.
I think it was like and it was just those kind of shots. It felt kind of very like natural history-esque, which obviously the Walking With series used to their benefit to kind of add a sense of, I guess, realism or legitimize what it was they were doing. But
documentary aspect.
Yeah. And I don't know. Yeah, I kind of quite dug that in a way.
Yeah, I liked that.
I didn't dislike the kind of video gamey treatment of the zombies, and I guess there had to be some kind of development in that department.
Yeah, I think the idea, and Garland's talked about this, the idea is that some of them have resorted to eating worms and like beetles and stuff because it's sort of easy.
Yeah.
Some of them have remained the same and kind of hunted deer, and they've kind of grouped together with these alphas. I do think it's slightly, if I'm kind of playing devil's advocate, I think it slightly detracts from the sort of frenzied nature of them.
Yeah, there's a bit more. Yeah.
So, but like at the same time, 28 years, man, like a lot can change, a lot can evolve, and it's an interesting concept that's slightly detracted from the first one's use of the kind of frenzied, like lack of coordination, I suppose. Yeah.
But then again, in the first one, 28 weeks, days later, there is that scene with the infected soldier,
Mailer.
Yeah, and the Christopher Eccleston goes back in the house and leaves Cillian Murphy, and there's like a moment.
Oh yeah,
a very brief moment where he's kind of looking at him, kind of going like, there's still some kind of vestige of humanity lost amongst this pure rage.
But that is, I mean,
So in that sense,
it kind of makes sense. Yeah, I like actually the theme in the second half of the film becomes largely in stark contrast to what this community thinks of the infected. There's a man, Dr. Kelson, who sort of sees them as people who are unwell, and it kind of gives it, and it speaks to what you were just saying about Mailer and that moment of connection. And there's a bit of it's actually one of the scariest bits of the first film when he says hello in the church and two of them just get up and look at him. They don't quite know what to do. They're just looking at him just like and there's it's horrifying. And they expand on that, the idea that these people are still alive and there's a brain in there somewhere, and he kind of memorializes them.
And it's kind of it's in stark contrast, as you say, to the kind of villagers' attitude to them, which is like just
kill them, get rid of them,
which
repel the invaders.
Yeah, exactly. And there's this kind of the idea that is it Kelson?
Kelson, yeah.
He's obviously a doctor, a man of very high intellect.
Yeah.
And it's almost like that has allowed him to see these kind of infected as that because of his knowledge of medicine and kind of the human body and being a doctor. Whereas obviously they don't have that. So people in that sort of small, tight community are more susceptible to kind of dehumanizing them and killing them because of that kind of lack of... And it kind of boils down to what we're saying about this kind of...
Boiled.
Hey! That's twice. I think he said it again. It sort of goes back to the idea about what that kind of revisionism is dependent on, sort of, in some way, anti-intellectualism.
Yes, definitely. And the refusal to seek advice from experts in their field can be hugely damaging to communities. I mean, a community without a doctor...
Not that experts can be wrong.
Oh, no. It's more nuanced than that. But
an expert would know he's wrong more than the people that... think he's wrong.
Cursory knowledge. Or have just observed these things from a distance and be like, they're horrible. Whereas he is, he's a kind
of lives with them, lives among them.
He knows what, like, he
names them.
Samson.
Yeah.
And that idea as well, the idea of a person being sick and being unwell and in need of, I think he kind of acknowledges that they need to die, but he's not going to be the one to do it. Like he
doesn't kill them, does he?
He uses darts to subdue them, so they're not dangerous for a bit. But then at the same time, actually, I think one of my favourite scene in the film. I'm venturing to spoiler territory now. Spike's mother isn't well, and he takes her to see this doctor, and you think that she is going to be cured. I kind of was convinced that he would diagnose her with some kind of memory condition, and he would say, you need to eat these things, you need to do this, you need to do this, and then over the course of the second film she would recover. And so to have the diagnosis be terminal, to be cancer, was so I was floored by that, really. And then the subsequent moment, the kind of realization that Spike, his journey has been futile, and ultimately it's only going to lead to his mother's death is so poignant. It's the best scene in the film, I think. Aside from all the franchise stuff and the stuff that I love about Boyle, I thought that scene was so moving. And I can understand why it wouldn't work for everyone. It's pretty abstract and it's pretty atypical of a zombie movie, but the idea that Kelson and his philosophy on the infected kind of gets transplanted onto something that we all as human beings today are either directly or indirectly affected by, kind of hammers it home just how non-science fiction this idea is, and how tragic it would be if but sort of how inevitable it would be if you had to say goodbye to a loved one in this way, whether they got infected or whether they got cancer. It's the same. All of a sudden, this sort of values align with each other. And the script has its fair share of problems, but that moment I loved. I really loved that moment. I thought that elevated it hugely for me, that scene. Don't know. Yeah, well, I don't know what your take on it.
It's interesting. I'm interested to know because I felt that I don't really remember what I was thinking about her sort of trajectory as a character, but I'm interested in the fact that you felt that she was going to survive.
I really
What was the kind of rationale behind that?
literally, I thought, oh, they won't kill Jodie Comer.
Oh right, okay.
She's got like first billing. She's in all the promotional material. She's unwell but able to walk.
Yeah.
She
And kill a zombie.
Kill zombies. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I thought we're just getting started with Isla. She's really interesting.
What a character!
Really good.
Yeah.
Really well performed as well.
Yeah, I mean, totally. I mean, yeah. Again, we said this before in the context of 28 days, but 28 years. It's kind of similar in the sense, perhaps more apparent in this one for me anyway, that Garland's thematic grapplings don't always bear fruit. Boyle gives them the fruit.
Yeah,
or the performances do, and Comer is fucking good in this film.
Yeah,
I mean, she's a fantastic actor, and
so's Spike as well.
yeah, there's a lot. I mean, and Aaron Taylor Johnson, who gets his fair share of detractors.
Yeah, he does.
I've noticed that about him. Every time he's in a film, I was like, oh, he's a bit shit in that. I was like, well, I don't really see it. I mean, okay, his accent was a little bit ropey in Nosferatu, but like, I don't think he was that bad.
No.
I actually thought he was kind of in keeping with the kind of
I really liked him in Nosferatu.
the theatrical elements of the film.
Yeah,
but
yeah.
hey ho.
He acted like he was in a play. I loved it.
I thought it was quite. Yeah, I liked
comic
it too.
relief turned tragic.
Yeah.
Nosferatu.
But I thought he was quite good in this as well.
Yeah. I thought he nailed the action. I thought he. There's a bit where he punches a wall. I was like, wow, that really worked. Like that he plays the misguided dad. You know, kind of staunchly wanted to bring his son up as like a soldier and in conflict with what his son might actually want for himself. I love the way he played that. And there's a degree
The way the society, he's a reflection of the way that small society just expects that from people.
Yes.
To fulfill these roles in society for the greater good.
He sort of low-key abandoned his wife as well, and the way he interacts with her I thought was quite interesting. Like he just sort of says like, do you want a cup of water, love? And meanwhile her son is like fully invested in her
Doting on her,
recovery.
yeah.
Taylor Johnson's character Jamie just
I think he's fatigued by it, isn't he? It's that sort of idea that obviously it's probably greatly exacerbated by living in a kind of post-apocalyptic environment, but the idea that, you know, living with something like that is taking its toll on him.
Yes.
And his kind of original kind of luster to kind of get through it is you know, all but gone.
Yeah.
And that's where he's obviously
focusing on his son. And
he you know, he has his bit on the side.
Yeah.
You know, his affair.
Yeah.
Who's obviously giving him the sexual satisfaction that he can't get from his partner.
Yeah.
So I mean, and by no means am I justifying the action at all. But
there's a three-dimensional thing going on.
There's something going on with the character in that sense, and I thought that kind of greyness I thought was quite interesting and quite bold to include in a film that is spinning a lot of plates thematically and narratively.
Yeah.
And I thought, again, Garland has some slight reservations, some aspects of those plates and how they kind of, it doesn't always suit the broader themes or very much the kind of the tension that sometimes gets lost a little bit. I thought, it was a bold move to include that kind of greyness.
Yeah, definitely. One of the strengths of the film. Shame he wasn't in it a bit more, actually. I'd say it wouldn't have hurt to have him come on.
I thought he was going to go after him.
Yeah, same.
I was like, oh.
Yeah, it was the way that played out was interesting. I loved that. I think the ending to the sort of shock followed by this just the way, even down to the way Alfie Williams says "doctor," like he says it in that kind of northern way, which really hammers home the emotion of his realization that he's brought his mum here not to be cured but to die. And he says, "Doctor," like I can't really. I'm not doing it justice at all, but like the way he says it is just so urgent and so sad. Really got me. I choked up a little bit in that moment. I'm not alone in that way of thinking. Actually, a lot of people found this one quite upsetting. So, do you want to talk about the ending?
Yeah, I mean that could maybe be the window into some of the kind of sort of slight uncertainties I had about the film.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
But yeah, no, the ending is. I don't really. The whole week, I guess a good way to start this is to say the whole week I've been sending you Just like people say the ending of 28 Years Later, just clips from Power Rangers.
Yeah. It's I'll tell you what.
And that is not an exaggeration.
No. The tonal shift is one of the weirdest I've ever seen, ever. And
it's certainly in a not main story. That's not necessarily a main. Maybe it is.
It's like watching a sketch show. It just flips.
Yeah.
And I have tried really hard to reconcile with it and tried to sort of justify it because, as a fan, I feel like I should do this ending due diligence. And as of recording, I'm still really confused by it. And
it just it completely undermines any of the tension that the film has done largely quite a good job of building up.
Yeah.
Like Aaron Taylor Johnson's, he's a fairly well-built guy, and it's obviously his competency is it's apparent as a key part of his character, one of his few strengths as an individual, which of course is offset by his kind of imperfections as a human being. But even he, despite his competency, there is an element of
don't fuck this up, mate. Yeah.
But these fellas,
ladies, Jack O'Connell, they're called Jimmies apparently.
So they're this kind of like gang of people that in one fell swoop took the film from, which I thought was a more increasingly action orientated horror film anyway.
Yes, yeah.
Into the realms of kind of like absurdity.
Yeah. Maybe intentional absurdity, but
some people have got an appetite for that kind of thing.
Yeah, I didn't at that moment. It was so close to the end, and I was so close to being satisfied and being like, fucking 9 out of 10, man. And they really did just do a number on me. I was like, fuck.
What the fuck is going on?
Had the rest of the film been weaker, I would have been really gutted.
Because
I've the aforementioned dreams and the sort of anticipation and the trailers, and I was so drummed up for this. Luckily, the rest of the film I can preserve it as its own thing. I can basically do a little edit in my head. But these kind of characters are not only are they kind of the musical choices they use sort of like weird rocky Power Rangers-y type vibe. Their costumes are not that of people that have been living in a post-apocalyptic world for 28 years.
Yeah.
I don't know if they've just managed to find a sort of solar-powered washing machine or something. But it's like going to a restaurant having a 3-course meal and it being delightful, and then the brownie at the end having like baked beans or a potato smiley on top of it.
The waiters just start shagging it.
Yeah. It's so weird. I've done so much research about it as well, and I still can't quite navigate. Like there's like Jimmy Savile type, like he's dressed a bit like Jimmy Savile. Obviously they're called Jimmies.
Yeah.
There's a preoccupation with children's entertainment, which bookends the film. So there's something in that, but man, they didn't have to go that hard, really.
I think the film is the franchise, is clearly drifting away from that kind of lo-fi, grotty realism of the first film.
Yeah.
You could argue the ending of 28 Days Later is particularly, the way in which...
shot on film, that ending.
Is it?
Yeah. Because the idea is that the world was cleaned up a bit.
Of course. Yeah. There we go. But you know what I mean? Like, so that transition to something perhaps a bit more fanciful.
Yeah.
Obviously, like as you say, to suit those kind of themes, it's fine. You can forgive that, and I'd still love the movie, But you can see throughout the narrative of 28 years, there is this kind of, broadly speaking, a commitment to the viscerality of action.
Yeah.
Obviously, there's still horror, there's still tension, there's still gore.
Yeah, it's violent.
A lot for a 15.
Yeah.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
And also in the context of 28 Days Later, I remember we said, probably on this podcast a few episodes ago, that we were surprised it was a 15, given that 28 Days is an 18.
Yes, yeah.
You said it'd gone down to 15, and it has, because I watched it on Amazon and it said 15.
Okay.
So I was like, okay, so that's happened.
Yeah. Weird.
But I just think that it was definitely going in the direction of something that it focuses a lot on the impact of the arrows. The sequences do feel a little bit more stylized.
There's like
more
this
broadly speaking,
sort of like bullet timey type.
Pauses,
rack to the side.
Yeah.
Continue. It's an odd choice.
again, Boyle just having a real good time.
Can't help himself.
No,
can
he
he?
really
I
can't.
want to try it like this. Really?
Broadly speaking, okay.
Kind of works. Yeah.
Maybe that was kind of like it was kind of pointing in the direction of it's going to go even further.
Yeah.
But you're right. I just what's going on?
It left.
It felt very Walking Dead-y. Do you know how like in these kind of like long episodic zombie things, they have like characters that are kooky.
Yeah.
Like, so Jeffrey Dean Morgan is that the guy? He's
Yeah.
like leather. He's dressed like a biker.
That's it,
So there's lots of these gangs that sort of define themselves by like some kind of scrap of the past that's long dead.
Yeah,
and that becomes their kind of signifier. Again, like a video game.
Yes.
Thing. They tend to be bonded by like this idea they're committed to a code or a way of life or a fashion sense, and and it just didn't seem to. It didn't work in the basic. What we, like you said, what we'd seen already.
Yeah,
and the context of the fact they were dressed like that and they acted like that and they looked like that.
Yeah. Really strange and an odd use of Jack O'Connell, who's very good.
Fantastic.
I really thought his character
Darby's
was
finest,
different.
of course.
Yeah. Even just subtle adjustments, like lose the soundtrack. You can do the Power Rangers stuff, I guess. Like but at least have them dressed in like drab post-apocalyptic decor, and just tone it down, man. Just like it's fine to have like a soft, floaty landing. Like there's going to be a sequel. I'm going to go see it. Of course, I am. I really hope they, without retconning what has happened at the end here, I really hope they at least explain its stylistic choice.
I think it signifies a commitment to go a completely different direction because it's a different director, isn't it?
Yeah, Nida Costa. Yeah.
So I don't know. And maybe it will justify it, and maybe like God, because we've said this before. We said this in the context of like Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
Yeah,
the difference between 1 and 2 is so staggering.
Yes,
and yet 2 works on its own.
Maybe.
So maybe we will look back at the end of 1 and think, no, that's totally justified.
Yeah.
But for now, give it. And also, we talked about the thing again. We said before, a sequel to a film doesn't owe anything to you as someone that holds the original in.
Yes. Yep.
And that's, again, in a way, totally at odds with the kind of thing that we lament quite a lot about cinema, which is constantly either kind of like self-referencing or... So the narrative architecture of a lot of Hollywood movies is either built on self-referencing if it's not a kind of pre-existing property, or if it is a pre-existing property, it's very much based on the idea of continuing a lot of the themes and ideas of previous films, copying them verbatim, in the case of Alien Romulus, for example. So, in a way, it does kind of go against everything that we kind of dislike.
Yes. I would... The only defense I have for it is 28 Days Later has that supermarket scene, man. Like, that is the only thing I can think of which makes me think, oh, well, maybe that's just the direction they wanted to take it. They wanted to end it with like a hope, because that supermarket scene is really goofy.
Yeah.
And they're like talking about like Terry's chocolate oranges and stuff. And but I think that scene kind of hammers home that wish fulfillment thing I was talking about, and this new one really doesn't. It's just odd. It left a weird taste in my mouth after a largely enjoyable and satisfying experience for me, anyway.
Yeah. I think broadly speaking, they're going to have to do some major work on the zombies to make them scary again.
Yep.
If they're that easily dispatched, like doing front flips and jumping over them and stabbing them, and almost kind of like there's an artistry to killing them, whereas before it was like put them down and move on.
Yeah.
I don't know. I really don't know about that.
Nearly ruined Cheddar Gorge for me.
Yeah. Never going there again.
Don't be surprised if you haven't watched it. Hopefully you have, because we've spoiled the fuck out of it. But don't be surprised if the ending baffles you. I wanted to tell Alfie because he was going to see it on yesterday, and I told him it was really good because I thought the film was. I didn't mention the ending, and he texted me saying, "What the fuck was that ending about?" I was like, I don't know. We'll see. I'm going to go see the second one. I'm quite looking forward to it still, just because I like the Infected and the way they're filmed and that kind of thing. I don't know.
Boyle's coming back to direct the third one, isn't he?
If it gets financed, yes. It's doing quite well, this. It's already made its budget back. It's 60 million opening weekend globally. So
It'd be fine. wouldn't it?
it'll get financing. I'll finance it if not. A couple of credit cards. There you go. Yeah. Nice.
Sell the DVD collection.
Yeah. No, don't know. Just I'm not going to rate it. I didn't rate it on Letterboxd actually because
I saw.
I was I just don't think I feel like a rating from me wouldn't mean anything, just because I'm so in love with the franchise in a way that I'm not about most franchises. So left it out. Might carry it on. Who knows?
Yeah, I mean, I never give ratings. Some people might call that non-committal, but my philosophy is very much the same as yours in the sense that how can I give like one film, I don't know, like one film like 4 stars, but the reason I enjoy the 4 star, the reason I enjoy it is so different to like I would like watching Die Hard 3.
Right? Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Okay. Yeah. So
you know what I mean? So it's like how can you? I don't know. I mean, don't
you
be
can
wrong, I
only
have no
express
problem
your
with people.
enjoyment and your satisfaction with the film with words, not with a star rating.
Yeah, I'm just an articulate guy.
I just love it. I'm gonna copy
I'm
you.
really interesting. For those who've listened for a long time, no, that's not true. But yeah, I think that the film takes a lot on, it bites a lot. It bites a lot.
Yeah.
Why not? It bites a lot, and I think there are some things that don't quite work for me or that don't mature in the narrative. So there's a few moments that are a little bit too whimsical as well. I thought the sort of nighttime starscape scene, I was a bit like,
that's received a lot of praise on. I thought I am in agreement. I thought that was like done quite badly in terms of the compositing. It sort of took me out of what was otherwise a really ferocious action sequence.
Yeah.
Them running across the causeway. Odd. Just odd. I didn't hate the oddness. I think Boyle is good at sort of interweaving those sorts of things into his movies, but I think visually it could have been a lot better, and yes, could have dialed it back a little bit.
Yeah.
There's a lot of harmony introduced at a moment of ferocity, which was a bit of an odd one, yeah.
Yeah. Also, the zombie giving birth. We haven't talked about that.
Oh, yeah. I like that a lot.
Have you done any sort of digging with that thematically?
Yeah,
So what's the kind of situ? So was she impregnated by an alpha?
Impregnated by an alpha, yeah. And the idea I took away from it was that the pain of the childbirth momentarily forced back the sort of the rage in her, and she had to focus on giving birth.
Yeah, I didn't mind that bit.
I liked that bit
and I
a
thought,
lot,
given the context of obviously Jodie Comer's character's trajectory is kind of coming in and out of who she is. That was like her reconnecting to that sort of sense of who she was, and
I liked that bit. Yeah,
that compassion and decency that obviously is a big part of her character and is a big part of the reason why she's obviously such a revered mother. What about the birth of the non-infected baby? What's that about?
Oh, what? Like the idea that a baby can be protected from the virus. He just gets explained away in
placenta.
Placenta, yeah. Garland maybe being a bit like lazy, I guess, in the sense of just like kind of explaining it away quickly.
Surely that baby would be born and immediately in big trouble.
Yes, and I think maybe what generally happens is they are just quickly infected by their parents or by someone, but I don't know. I didn't mind the baby thing. I thought I liked the idea that the baby would be protected from the virus via the placenta, because like that can happen with AIDS. So scientifically, there's a basis there. What were your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I don't know. I thought it was just an example of a bit too much going on here.
Oh, okay.
For me,
yeah. But they could have left that bit out.
But it wasn't enough for me to be like, oh, this has pulled me out and this is crap. So I accepted it because I was broadly speaking thinking this is good and I like it. So it's not going to sort of detract too much from me.
Did you find that the moment of the sort of 5 minutes of quite broad humour? What did you think about that?
Oh yeah, with the Swedish fella.
Yeah.
That
tonal shift.
Yeah, it was. I liked that on a sort of thematic level. And it goes back to talking about the tech. Like obviously their version of what the sort of lost modernity is like dial up.
Yeah. There's a
And there's a bit where he plays it in the soundscape, right? The sort of kind of that familiar sort of tone that we're all kind of glad doesn't exist anymore. But although, yeah,
there's nostalgia to it.
Yeah, of course there is. But yeah, broadly speaking, that element I quite liked because obviously we're watching it from the perspective of we know everything that this Swedish fella is talking about, and they don't. And obviously their kind of like technological evolution has been stunted considerably by this outbreak and obviously the subsequent kind of quarantine. So I quite liked that in a way. I thought it was interesting, like the idea that obviously they're kind of like patrolling it and obviously stop making sure that like there's nothing coming over. Which again ties into the broader themes of the kind of England, British European relations. I thought it was quite odd that, and again it goes back to this ending, and it's like sort of like a nitpicky thing, but like a group of 8 guys with like automatic rifles couldn't do what like a sort of Jimmy Savile knockoff with like a stake could do with ease.
Oh right, yeah, I didn't actually think about that. Yeah,
and I guess
they
again
get dispatched pretty quickly.
We know with horror movies, obviously you have to kind of like accept they're going to be the kind of rules of the kind of world are quite flexible.
Yeah.
So, and we've said that quite a lot in defense of other horror movies. So perhaps it's kind of a bit hypocritical of me to criticize it on that basis, but I don't know. Yeah, I didn't mind it.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was a really crap way of answering your question.
No, I quite like the sort of moment of comic relief. It was at odds with the rest of the film in terms of its tone.
There's quite a lot in theory there is.
Yeah.
Narratively, there's a lot that's at odds with each other. But that is, again, like I say, Garland going, yeah. And Boyle going, give it here.
Yeah.
I will give this agency.
Yeah, that's true. Actually, that's a really good way of putting it. Tonally, bit of a mush. If you're a fan of the original, you'll love the first half. Second half will probably be down to your tastes in other genres.
Yeah, that's the part that's taken the most flack, isn't it? The second half of the film.
I liked both halves. It was only right at the end where I thought, you fucked it. You fucked it, mate.
Oh, God.
Oh, Jesus. What's that lens flare about?
Yeah. Take you back to the pendulous cock.
Yeah. Oh, come on, Samson. More Samson. I liked him. I liked that particular.
I liked the way they accentuated the footsteps when they're running. So that scene when they're running across the causeway, I thought that was really brilliantly well done. And
the way that bit's edited and how it intercuts with the party. Once they started intercutting with the party and the galaxy wasn't in view quite as much, I was like, okay, we're all right again here.
And the party stuff was really good. It kind of the kind of just sickeningly, sort of swelteringly sickening nature of kind of British drinking culture.
Yeah, exacerbated by the fact that it looked like a conservative club
as
well. The interior of that, I was like, oh, and it's like a Rotary Club kind of vibe.
Picture of Queen Elizabeth on the wall.
Yeah. No, I don't know.
Not for me.
Not for me, but I did great scene.
Thematically, absolutely excellent scene. Yeah,
nice.
Yeah,
That's what I thought about 28 years later.
Are you happy?
Yeah, I am happy. Ultimately, I am. I think there's so much in that film for me to love. I was catered for as a fan, and I was also interested as a general movie audience member. I think the ending is, I want to see the second one, so maybe it worked, I guess, as a marketing ploy.
Yeah,
I do want to see the second one. I want to see how they take it. I'm not going to act like I wasn't disappointed by the very end, but I'm glad. I'm glad they made it, and Boyle's firing on all cylinders mostly. So
I
most
agree with
cylinders.
Yeah, I agree.
Nice,
good
outro.
Yeah.
Questing the cinematic void.
There we have it then.
Yeah.
28. It's probably 28, some kind of denomination of time later since you started listening to this podcast.
Yeah.
Broadly speaking, really enjoyed it.
Yeah. Likewise.
A flawed film, though. breaks my heart to say it, but it isn't perfect.
But it's better than coming out thinking that was fucking shit.
Yes, it
which is so often the case these days. And I know perhaps we attribute cynicism to too much of the modern landscape of film, and it's not always merited or fair. I grant you. However, a lot of the time you're sort of just gearing up to be disappointed.
Yeah, that's it.
But yeah, no, flawed, but by no means a bad movie.
No.
A very good movie.
Yeah, I love it.
Almost a great movie in part.
Yeah, definitely. What are we doing next week?
Well, we're going from the world of zombies to dinosaurs.
Yeah.
Jurassic World
Rebirth.
Yeah. Don't really have a great deal of enthusiasm for this.
The last
Based
one,
on the last ones were fucking shit.
the last one I
Beyond
watched
measure.
was Fallen Kingdom, which was really naff.
Was that the second one of the new? Well, yeah, because I didn't
Yeah.
even bother with the third one after that.
Same, yeah.
So I'm saying that the last two. What I mean is that one in particular was really, really shit.
Yeah.
So I'm not really holding out a great deal of hope for this one. Although it's Gareth Evans.
Yeah, Edwards.
Evans
is the-
Oh, there we go. I've
Evans
done it.
is
I
the
said
raid.
I wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I said I wouldn't do it.
Well, it all boils down to...
Your ineptitude, Dan. Yeah, I don't know. An attempt to bring it back, to kind of legitimize and inject life into something again, which is very beloved.
Yeah, I mean, the title is so on the nose, isn't it? It's literally like a rebirth. If you didn't like the last one, maybe you might like this
It's
one.
sorted now. It's fixed.
Yeah, it's
we
all right.
fixed it.
We realised far too late that the previous ones weren't very good.
Yeah.
And this one's now good again.
Yeah.
Hence rebirth in the title.
Yeah.
What do you think of that? Looks orange. Looks very orange.
Yeah, I thought that.
An orange
Very
movie.
sweaty tone to it.
Yeah. Kind of a new cast, stripping back it to it just being maybe like an Escape from the Island film. Kind of could be at least interesting. I wasn't alive when Jurassic Park came out, so I was introduced to it quite
93?
late. 93, yeah.
Yeah, I obviously was too young to watch that when it upon release, but as a child, I was absolutely obsessed with dinosaurs. So I obviously watched it probably still too young, and I remember the scene of the T-Rex eating the guy in the toilet, like really bothering me as a child.
Yeah. Yeah, I had a visceral reaction to that.
Spielberg does that to a lot to me with E.T.,
Oh, yeah, he
dinosaurs.
Stop
Something,
it, mate.
yeah.
Stop traumatizing
Yeah,
us.
stop traumatizing me, yeah.
Yeah, man. Unbelievable. When I watched Munich when I was 11 as well, that traumatized me. What are you doing, Spielberg? That's out in about a week, so we'll go and watch that.
Yeah.
Looking forward to discussing dinosaur movies.
Yeah, we were just sort of discussing in the interim that there's not many that aren't Jurassic Park.
That's not, is there? Yeah. The Good Dinosaurs.
Land
one of
Before
them.
Time.
Land of the Lost. I mean, King Kong you mentioned as well.
King Kong, yeah. The
which
Lost
is-
World, the original from the 1920s.
Oh, yeah. It's strange that got co-opted into being a title film.
Yeah.
A film I quite like.
It's, I like it, yeah. Well, my memory of it is quite good. But yeah, no, positive. Yeah, I don't know. It's going to be interesting, I guess. And the fact that it exerts so much dominance is a topic in itself, I think, for discussion.
Yeah, definitely.
So, yes. Well, in the meantime, thanks for getting to the end of another.
Thank you very much.
Always appreciated. And we'll catch you in the next one. In the meantime, take it easy, look after yourself,
See you then.
etc., etc.
Bye.
Bye.